So one of our statements we say a lot at Crossway is that we exist for intersecting life with faith, and the intersection point of life and faith is Jesus Christ. And so our groups are called intersect groups, where our lives intersect, where we're both, the goal is to be known and to know others.
At our church, we have currently have 14 small groups. And the biggest way that we recruit for groups is one-on-one. So a group leader or a member will invite someone else to a group. Twice a year, we'll do a big push in January and in September.
We need to be more available to them instead of just on Sundays. So the small group or small church mentality we had to walk that Jesus did with his disciples. Like, you know, Jesus obviously went to temples and he obviously did those things in larger gatherings, but majority of his walk was with the disciples in his daily walk. He's eating with them, he's talking with them, he's, you know, sleeping next to them, he's living life. And so we knew that, especially with these individuals who have these life journeys or life struggles, that a one sermon a week was not going to get them on the path of a so-called holiness or righteousness. Like, we're talking about a real God who is needed in real situations. And so not just this mailbox Jesus who just needed a one check to save them. We're talking about a Jesus that needs to help them parent their kid because they're a single parent. We need a Jesus to help them get through the struggle that they've been dealing with, these addictions and like decisions on employment, decisions on just daily temptations. Like, how do we as a people help them understand that a real Jesus impacted our real lives, to help them understand that he can impact their real lives as well too. And that all can't be done on one day a week. So we quickly realized that we were going to have this on-ramp, this integration of a daily or some type of like hooking them up with individuals throughout our congregation to just walk with them and be able to check in with them every other day or something like that. And we found ourselves with the kind of a micro church, what some people kind of label it, small groups type of mentality. And so that's what we've really kind of seen work in our context.
Each of our groups, we try and build them around 4 core principles. We call them the ABCDs of group life. The A is accountability. At some level, when you join a group, you will be held accountable. And then as that community grows, that accountability deepens. And so at the beginning, it may just be something as simple, you weren't here on Sunday, we missed you, or you missed a group, we want to let you know that we missed you being around, to, as that community deepens, to things like, hey, I'm struggling with this sin, or I'm going through this, will you guys help me and walk with me through this and pray for me. So the A is accountability. The B is belonging. In a church of even 100, it can feel like you don't belong anywhere. I mean, you can get lost in the crowd, even in a group of 50. And so having a place where you feel like you belong, you know people and they know you, is important. So that's the B. The C is care. And this is a two-sided coin. You care for people inside your group, and you care for those outside of your group as well. And for example, my small group, just a couple of weeks ago, we went to a halfway house, and we just brought breakfast to the addicts there, the men struggling with addiction. And when we got there, we put the food out, and we didn't come ready to preach or share devotionals or anything like that. We just wanted to bring food and bless the men there. And so I told everyone, grab a buddy and go sit around, so that when they come in, it's not just our table of our small group and everybody else. And so we're going to mingle with everyone. And so we, a couple of people sat on one end of the room, a couple of people sat on another. And as the guys came in, they had to sit around us. And so we had just a wonderful time of conversation and encouraging some of these guys. And there was some massive brokenness, but there was also a great hunger for the things of God. And so that's care, right? That's, as a group, serving together. And to make things interesting, one of those guys came to church last Sunday. And so it was really cool to see. In fact, I was chatting with his sister, and his sister told me Never in my life would I have ever thought that I would be taking my brother to church, right? And so we didn't do anything. Like we just showed up, brought some food, and then sat and just listened to them. And it was really a beautiful time. So that's the care aspect. And then the D is the discipleship. This is where we open up the scriptures, we dig in together, we try and understand these things together and wrestle with the truths of scriptures, and how to live them out.
One of the first small groups I was in as an adult was one led by my mentor, Tamara, and she wanted us to memorize scripture. And we memorized all of Romans 8. And it was one of the hardest things I did. But what really sold it for me is if we memorized it and she didn't, she would buy us coffee. And if she memorized it and we didn't, we had to buy her coffee, right? So it was kind of like all egos were equally up for sacrifice on that table. And I think that that's kind of the difference with a small group versus a class, is there's not that natural power dynamic of student teacher that we're in a small group. It's kind of like we're all in this together to kind of share in suffering and share in, to celebrate with those who celebrate and to grieve with those who grieve, as we're reminded in Romans to do. And so I think there's just a different intimacy and connectedness that happens in a small group where it kind of disarms our fears and it disarms our boundaries and our guardedness in those places, because it may start similar where people are kind of more guarded, but as you walk through things or as you fail together or as someone goes through something hard, you start being connected because you know people truly and they know you. You're both known by others and you know them. So that's probably what I would say is different from a traditional class.
That's our heart, is this multiplication factor, and that people will be able, because some people just have anxiety, especially these day and age with what's going on with COVID and all this other stuff, but they're more comfortable going next door to someone's house than they are coming a mile and a half away to a larger building like ours. So we're okay with that. We're meeting them where they're at, and I'm okay with it. Because it's all about the kingdom. It's all about souls getting saved. And that's where we're at. Maybe call me young, maybe call me dumb.
But there's that dynamic still, right? Where can I ask a question and is it okay if I look like an idiot? And so we tried to make that Wednesday night class where it's kind of unpredictable in the structure of it. So there's not as much control, I know, as one of my teachers really wants. She gets annoyed with me where I'm like, we can have growth or we can have control. And so I'm going to push you to give up some control so that we can have some more growth. So part of how I try to manage that is remember that I don't get to decide how God grows his church. And that was probably the one thing that God said to me over and over and over and over, because I'm a slow learner. So over and over again throughout 2020 and 2021 was God saying to me, Cheryl, you don't get to decide how I grow my church.
I don't know if you've ever seen this. I'm sure you've never seen anything like this, but there's this thing in the culture of a lot of our churches. I call it Christian niceness. Like God wants us to be nice. And so if I'm going to be nice to you, it means I can never say anything to you that might offend you or that you don't like or that makes you uncomfortable. But the truth of the gospel is there may be some times I have to speak into your life and you don't want to hear it. And it's going to make you uncomfortable. And I'm going to violate this Christian nice thing that we get so uptight about in the name of for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of kingdom unity and mission. And so we run into that as well sometimes. It's like two people get into a disagreement and they get heated and animated. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It means that they've had a disagreement. But one person may think that they've violated the Christian nice culture. And so we have to address, hey, it's okay. It's actually healthy to have these disagreements. It's healthy to have these discussions. It's actually unhealthy to hold it all on the inside. And instead of talking to the person you have a problem with, I'm going to go to my 10 friends over here and form a coalition. That, that's dangerous.
The meeting that's happening in the coffee house, we have individuals, and it's about 8, and it's all women in that one. And someone asked, like, when will we think about splitting that one up and things like that? and my answer, and I feel like this is where the Lord leads us, is that this is how we have to know our leaders. Because just like Jethro told Moses, you give some to them 50, you give some to, like you have individuals who can handle, so like the capacity is different from everybody. So someone's small group can be 10. So, and I think that's where we as humans, we like to give numbers to everything. We try to limit everybody. Like your small group can only go to 12 and that's it. But what if that person's capacity is a little bit larger? What if it's 15? What if it's 20? Or what if somebody's capacity is smaller, but you're challenging them always to get to 12 and they look like they're under, like they're not meeting your expectations. But what if 5 or 6 is what they're really their capacity? So we're really trying to know our leaders, trying to get to where they're comfortable at. And quite honestly, the Dorothys, I feel like it's pretty much almost at their capacity, their leaders, not just because of the environment they're in, but the leaders that are leading them. The young ladies that are leading them really have this strong connection with their women. And even the unchurched people that's coming in, I feel like that the 8 to 10 will probably be their limit and what they'll be able to develop. So once it gets to that, I believe their co-leads will then be able to split from there, and then we'll add another group. But I don't think we'll get past 10 with that group, just because we know the leaders.
If you want to see authenticity or vulnerability in a group, then you yourself should be authentic or vulnerable. If you want to talk about sin in a group, well, then talk about your struggles with sin. That does a lot of things. That gives permission for other people to talk about it. And it also helps people realize that you're a human too. You're in the battle too, and you have your struggles as well. And I think that goes a long way in helping people to see, oh, okay, I can talk about this. I may be ashamed of it. It may be a risk for me, but if you're doing it, I can do it too.
To be willing to go back and apologize if something was just horribly wrong. Where we were, like I talked about that spiritual beings class, that more than once it felt clunky and muddy, where I was like, oh, I'm confusing people. But what I ran into is it opened up like a spot for questions to happen, where it opened up these places where it wasn't clean and it wasn't clear cut. And I even had someone going, I don't like how this isn't fitting in my boxes, Pastor Cheryl, and I don't like that. And so what I've tried to tell all of my leaders is be willing to be uncomfortable, be willing to not feel good about how class went, be willing to have each week be different.
What we always say this is assume the best. So we teach our leaders inside of their groups to never be divided among about politics, never be divided among these, political, like COVID or whatever. We always say serve them where they're at, meet them where they're at, and always assume the best. So we try to take out for the leader themselves, to take out them to be offended by anything. Like assume the best, like whatever this person is saying that you probably normally would have been offended by, they're white, you're black, or you're white and they're black and they're saying something, whatever, you assume the best, assume that they're meaning the best, even though it comes across with an attitude or whatever, assume that maybe they're hurt. Assume that assume it's your responsibility to assume the best, because that's a servant leadership perspective. And so with that teaching, we really haven't had much problem. And everybody, I feel like, because of these settings that we're in, when people come into those settings, we've added an environment or had an environment of just like, it's not just built around Bible study. It's about life. So everyone knows that no one is here to fix your problems. Like, we're not here to fix. We're here to share and carry that burden with you.
groups kind of, especially when we do them off campus, are much more effective than even like a big evangelism event or something else. That if someone says, hey, Malcolm, come to this group where, especially we had a coloring in Colossians group. People were like, hey, do you want to color for your mental health? I'm like, yeah. I mean, you're going to talk about the Bible? Yeah, but like, don't worry about it. Like, you can just ignore it and color. It became this very easy spot for people to come and get to know other people.
If you're not in a group, you're missing a part. You're missing part of the Parkgate experience, and I would argue the Christian experience too.